Hi, I'm Abigail Tyrrell from Raven Dreams Luxury Plus Size Lingerie, and this is Tips and Tricks. Today we're going to talk a little bit about stretch and how to calculate stretch. This is really important when you're working with a new fabric and any pattern at all. So there are two types of stretch, one which is four-way stretch and the other which is two-way stretch. We'll start out with two-way stretch. Now this is a silk elastane fabric with 90% silk and 10% elastane. And you can see that on the weft, it has quite a lot of stretch. But on the warp, there's no stretch at all. So when you're using a fabric, you need to understand this and look at your pattern and calculate for the fact that you don't have stretch in one direction. You can adjust to this by checking and measuring your bias stretch on any fabric, and in case you don't have that four-way stretch. Now this fabric is power mesh, and it has warp stretch and weft stretch, and it's equal measurement on both. But just in case, what you have and what the industry uses is called a stretch book. It's really very simple. Inside are every stretch fabric that I have with measurements calculated for what the stretch is this way, and this way. So your warp, your weft, and your bias. Take a 20 by 20 centimeter square of your fabric, and this is your test sample at rest. So this is your fabric at rest. And hold it on the line, then take it and stretch it out, and then measure on this line here where that comes, and that is your fabric at stretch, and that is 25 centimeters, and this is 20. So we have your fabric at rest, which is 20, and your fabric at stretch, which is 26. Now you're going to want to do this not just for your weft stretch, but for your warp stretch as well. So turn the fabric, line it up, and check your stretch. And this time it is 31. You can also, if you're not sure about the stretch on your grain, check your bias, and it is 31 as well. Now this is two-way stretch material, and this is silk and elastane, so 90% silk and 10% elastane. So we're going to check the weft stretch first by holding it down on the selvage, and this goes to 26. This is two-way stretch, so we actually have no stretch at all on the warp. But we can check what the bias is and stretch it, and that is 28. Now when you calculate stretch, you use one of two basic formulas. The first one is this. Now that we have all of our measurements together, we're going to throw them away and use what's on the card. Now you have your fabric at rest measurement, and we're using 20 centimeter squares, so that's 20 centimeters. Stretch factor times your measurement equals negative ease. For example, a waist measuring 90 centimeters, you divide it by 2, so that's the front of your pattern piece and your back of your pattern piece. So it's you do your front and your back, and that equals 45 centimeters. So 20 centimeters divided by 24 centimeters, that's your stretch fabric, equals 0.834. Now that's your stretch factor for that material, and it will be the same for any measurement that you're using for that material and in that direction. So warp, weft, or bias. So now that you have your stretch factor, you multiply that by 45, which is half of your measurement. That's your front. So we'll call it the front for the front piece. And that equals 37.53 centimeters. So when you look at a pattern and you take your measurement and you do your stretch factor, you can then take a measuring tape to your pattern on the front and see if it fits that 37.53 3 centimeters. As you can see, it's smaller than your waist measurement because fabric stretches to fit a body. So that is negative ease. And the second calculates the percentage. It's a little bit longer, but it comes out with around about the same number, barring a couple of millimeters. Now, the smaller sizes that you use, or the smaller down sizes that you go to, it becomes more and more important to be millimeter perfect on every measurement. But when you're in plus sizes, we have a lot of give. So it's much more forgivable. This is a little more complicated, but it gives you the ability to do different types of negative ease. So 0 is usually just fits the body perfectly, and that's usually sportswear, 2% for underwear, and 3% for swimwear. So for example, you have a 90 centimeter waist measurement, you divide it by 2, so you have the front waist and the back waist of your pattern piece. Again, that's 45 centimeters. So 20 centimeters divided by 24 is a factor of 0.834. Now that you have your stretch factor, you want to turn it into a percent. So you multiply it by 100 and you get 83%. Now, if you're doing 2% of stretch, that's 2% for every 10% of stretch. So you have 83%. So that's 8 times 2 equals 16%. Turn that into a fraction, multiply it by 45, and you have 7.2 centimeters. So 45, which is half your waist measurement, minus 7.2 equals 37.8 centimeters. The first calculation results were 37.53 centimeters. This calculation result is also 37.8 centimeters. So it's not that far off. They pretty much do the same thing. And we're going to quickly show you a third calculation, which is lazy percents. For example, you have a waist measurement of 90 centimeters. You divide it by 2, which is 45 centimeters. And then you want 2% of 45. So use a calculator. I use one online for a percent calculator. So 2% of 45 is 0.9. 45 minus 0.9 is 44.1 centimeters. Now, this is really lazy. It does give you a negative ease. It isn't a great one. Things are going to be looser on the body. I wouldn't recommend it, but the industry uses it too. In the next video, I'm going to tell you how to use these measurements and compare them to your patterns so that you know if it's going, which fabric you need to use, and if your fabric is going to be adequate for the pattern that you're using.